Two of you look this way.
Oh, Larry, yeah, the Blues Brothers.
Welcome everybody to our Thursday, February 4th Marin Energy Authority Board meeting. We conducted a closed session with our legal counsel discussing an anticipated litigation, and direction was given and dialogue was taken with counsel, and we have nothing further to report at this time on that matter. First item up then is public open time. Is there anyone who wishes to address us about an item that's not on tonight's agenda? Seeing no one rise, we'll go to the director's report. Dawn?
Good evening, directors. I have a couple of items this evening. First, I wanted to report that the Marin Energy Authority's implementation plan for the Marin Clean Energy Program has been approved by the California Public Utilities Commission. It was approved on February 2nd. We've included that in the supplemental packet, their approval letters, there for you to review. The next thing I wanted to report on is I wanted to let folks know that there was a meeting held last night in Fairfax Council where the idea of providing security, additional security for some of NEA's implementation loan was discussed, and there was a direction given to their city manager that they explore that further with us. So we've been in discussions today, and we'll have more to report on that soon.
That's great. That's really great of Fairfax. Thank you.
Do you want to add anything, Dr. Tremaine?
Just that it was done on a unanimous vote, and I think it just shows our town's level of support for this endeavor. So
That's awesome.
Great. And then I wanted to give an update, or actually before I do that, I wanted to just take care of a housekeeping item. Our executive committee met early this week and made a minor revision to the agenda. So what this means is that two of the agenda items that were at the end got moved up a little bit, and so that means that the packet that you received last week may show a few staff reports and agenda items out of sequence. So when you're going through your packet, make sure and look at the title, not the agenda number, if you're using your packet from last week. The packets from this week have been corrected. And then the last thing I wanted to report out on is some of our technical team and staff has been in discussions at the CPUC with our incumbent utility to discuss the service agreement. And we are in discussions about getting that process moving and getting that service agreement executed. And we are looking forward to having a resolution of that within the coming days.
Questions?
And that's it for my report.
Thank you, Don. No board questions? Any public? Okay, we'll go to item 3, the consent calendar. We have 3 items up. Approval of our minutes from January 4th, our second addendum to our contract with Richards, Watson, and Gershon, and our third addendum to our contract with Millbank, Tweed, Hadley, and McCloy. If there's no desire to pull anything, I'll just ask for a motion.
move.
Second.
Any public comment on the consent? Seeing none, vote. Is there any opposition to approving the consent calendar? Okay, hearing none, that passes. Item 4 is a request for us to approve resolution number 2010-01 honoring Mr. Chris Martin. Chris, would you like to approach the podium, please? Chris, we intend to embarrass you only slightly. But we very much want to honor and thank you for your service to the Marin Energy Authority over this past year and just register our sincere sorrow that you won't be able to continue working with us. So the resolution that is being proposed asks us to honor you, whereas the Marin Energy Authority is a joint powers authority established on December 19th, 2008, and organized under the Joint Exercise of Powers Act under Government Code of State Law. The town of Ross executed the Joint Powers Agreement establishing its membership in the Marin Energy Authority on December 11 of 08, and you, Chris, were appointed to represent the town of Ross on our board of directors. You exhibited great enthusiasm around windmills and other potential projects for renewable energy, with the business acumen of an experienced financier, but the joy of a boy with a cool new toy. And you were an excellent carpool driver, navigator, and methane gas humorist, driving through the farmlands of Solano County. And you were steadfast in your support of MEA's goals, always generous with your time, business expertise, and objective analysis of the issues. And your dedication and devotion to MEA was exemplified through your participation and commitment to MEA's technical committee, and we, your colleagues, will sorely miss your tweed jackets, good company, and your significant contributions. We therefore wish to resolve that, and with our staff, that we do intend to call on you to stay with us and to plug in other ways to support our efforts. We pass and adopt this resolution at a regular meeting of our Authority Board of Directors this evening. Can I ask for a second on that item?
Second.
Is there any opposition to approving this resolution?
Do I get to give a comment?
As soon as I hand it to you. Hearing no opposition, that carries.
All right.
You know, given that Ross withdrew from this wonderful effort, it should be pink, a pink note. Yeah, I do wear on occasion my father's old tweed coat. But I want to defer any comment about the methane gas generation. I'm not an expert on that. But I would like to thank all of you for the resolution, and more significantly for involving me in the MEA efforts. It's truly a worthwhile endeavor. It's an uphill battle. PG&E is a formidable opponent, preserving its Northern California monopoly at whatever cost. Ross, the town I represent, unfortunately withdrew from the MEA. But it did so on a very narrow vote. It was 3-2. And the swing vote stated that he would like to reconsider joining the MEA once it was up and running. If, however, the statewide initiative on the June ballot that PG&E is spending millions of dollars crafting and furthering, if that passes, it will make it impossible for Ross, as well as many other communities, all communities across the state, from joining a community choice aggregation program. Unfortunately, PG&E seems to be reliving a page from its past. Its tactics to rub out community choice aggregation mirror the bleakest days of San Francisco's history, when city boss Abe Roof had a political machine that controlled the Board of Supervisors of San Francisco, the Chief of Police, and several judges as well. It was during this period, shortly after the 1906 earthquake and the devastating fire that leveled San Francisco, that 16 of the 18 members of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors confessed to a grand jury that they had taken bribes from Abe Roof and PG&E. I am optimistic that the June initiative will be defeated by the people of California, who, despite the millions of dollars that PG&E and other utilities will spend, realize that competition and freedom of choice is the foundation of our economy and our democratic society. I'm also optimistic that the MEA will be successful with its endeavors and be of public benefit for generations to Marin County and its citizens. Thank you for this resolution, and I'll be on the sidelines active.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. Very good. With that, we'll move to item number 5, which is proposed approval of our power purchase agreement with Shell Energy North America. Don?
Thank you. So just to give a little background, on May 7th, your board approved and released a request for proposal for full requirements electricity supply to provide electricity for a community choice aggregation program. This competitive solicitation process resulted in 12 bids, which were evaluated and narrowed down to 3 full requirements bidders. We then set out to negotiate a draft contract, which was released publicly in early October for a draft period of review among all of our member agencies. We received a lot of input during that time, which was incorporated into the final draft, which was approved by your board on November 5th. Since that time, the draft contract has been undergoing a 90-day review period. We've been meeting multiple times with many of our member agencies, cities, towns, and the county, and sharing information about what is included in the draft. And just as a reminder, a couple of the key provisions in there are that the supplier would be required to provide 25%, a minimum of 25% renewable energy content. That would be the default service option for all participating customers. They would also be required to provide a 100% renewable energy product to customers for as many customers as choose that product. The length of service is 5 years, and if your board approves the attached contract and authorizes the chair to execute the contract, service to Phase 1 customers for the MEA program can begin to customers as early as May of this year. A couple of other provisions I'd like to call out. The Deep Green program will be offered at a slight premium, which is estimated to come in at between $3 and $6 per month for an average residential customer. And we are also included a one change in the contract, which I want to highlight this evening. This is an addition that's called, it's 2.3, and it's called carbon neutral energy. It's a requirement that the seller shall provide carbon neutral energy to the buyer in an amount not less than 53% of total energy deliveries for the period of delivery, and that if the carbon content of such energy is equal to or less than the carbon content of energy supplied by our incumbent utility in the North Pass service territory. So this is one addition to the confirmation, but the substance of the remaining text remains essentially the same. There's one other minor change, which is we were developing a scheduling coordinator agreement, and rather than having a completely separate document, we ended up rolling that into the overarching confirmation document, so you'll see that included at the end as an appendix. Before I'm going to turn this over to our general counsel, but first I wanted to turn it over to John DeLessi to talk about this provision 2.3 and the greenhouse gas analysis.
Great, thanks. And can we get the slide up, Jimmy? So basically the sort of the fundamental essence of this new provision 2.3 is to make it explicit that the MEA's GHG emissions will be no greater than PG&E's. I mean, we anticipate that that this program will actually reduce GHG emissions, but there has been some dispute of that. And so what this provision does is it just makes it explicit that the MEA's GHG emissions will be equal to or less than PG&E's. And so if you look at the provision, it sets forth that at the initial delivery period, which would be 2010, that at least 53% of the energy supply must be from non-GHG emitting sources. And then subsequent to that, there's a check against what PG&E's GHG profile looks like, and then there's a provision to ensure that the portfolio is no greater than PG&E's content. So starting with the 53%, and using the same emissions rates and analysis that PG&E used in its comments in terms of their consultant's analysis of MEA's GHG profile, you can see here that the 53% GHG-free content actually does in fact emit or result in fewer GHG emissions than PG&E. And so just walking through these numbers real quickly, in terms of the first year sales of MEA, in terms of projected sales, about 98,000 megawatt hours for 2010. And the 53% of that portfolio must be GHG free, meaning that no more than 47% can be resources that emit GHG. So using the same then emissions rate for the GHG emitting resources as PG&E used in their analysis, that results in an overall emissions rate for GHG of 517 pounds per megawatt hour. That compares to what PG&E has reported or projected for 2010 in their analysis of 636. So the average emissions rate for MEA will be less. As a result, the total tons of GHG emitted for MEA is 22,981 versus 28,271 for the PG&E portfolio. So for a net decrease of 5,290 tons.
Thank you.
Are there any board questions to John about this piece? Thanks, John. Greg?
Chair, members of the board, let me direct the CEQA questions that have come up during our consideration of the contract. And in particular, there was a letter submitted by PG&E during the comment period that we had provided for, and also another letter after the comment period from a resident from Nevada, which focused on the same issue of whether or not Great Clean Energy will be emitting more greenhouse gases than PG&E over the next 5-year term. And just a little backdrop here, one thing is back in November, when we first came to the board with staff's initial recommendation on how to treat this project under CEQA, there was a recommendation to rely upon 2 categorical exemptions. One was under 15308, which was the Class 8 regulatory exemption, and the other was the 15061B3 exemption, where you can determine with certainty there will be no adverse environmental effects. Since that time, that recommendation was made. Staff had received information from the PUC and consulted with PUC staff with respect to how power purchase agreements are treated by the PUC, which we thought would be a highly relevant piece of information to share with the board. And what we discovered was that power purchase agreements, including many entered into by PG&E over a period of time, as recently as last year, had no CEQA review at all. And the reason is these are market purchases of electricity and do not involve construction of new facilities. And that is precisely the type of contract that is before you this evening. The contract says there will be no new construction, that energy will come from existing facilities. So it is a market-based purchase agreement. So as we looked at how the PUC treated this issue, and I had discussions with their legal counsel, who was surprised, in fact, that this issue had come up during our proceedings here, that CEQA applied to a power purchase agreement. We looked at this issue, whether or not this is even a project in the first place. And for that reason, staff is now recommending that there really be a 3-step process here taken by the board in considering the application of CEQA to this activity here, this contract. And the first would be to determine that the contract is not a project under CEQA. But if it is, it's exempt, and it is exempt under the 2 exemptions that were previously recommended to you by staff back in November. The one thing I would like to emphasize and build upon here in terms of the presentation this evening regarding the new condition added to the contract, and this one's really a very important one. We've had an ongoing debate about who's greener over the next 5 years, and I think information that staff has presented to the board has been clearly that Marine Clean Energy will be much greener than PG&E over that 5-year period. That's been disputed. And we could continue that dispute, and we thought, really, rather than doing that, it'd be much clearer to have an ironclad guarantee in the contract that would prevent the greenhouse gas emissions of Marine Clean Energy ever exceeding those of PG&E, and we still expect they'll be much better, but in no case will they be worse. And the way this has been designed, because you never know from year to year what conditions may occur, is that for some reason in a given year, that the emissions from Marine Clean Energy had more carbon than PG&E. There then is a required 90-day period within which Marine Clean Energy must purchase what are called environmental products, that be carbon offsets or other environmental offsets to offset any excess carbon over PG&E in that year. That's not expected. That's the final foolproof aspect of this condition to absolutely guarantee that under all circumstances, the carbon content of the energy produced by Marine Clean Energy will not exceed PG&E. So that is now, we believe, an important part of the contract and really should put to rest this whole dispute over whether or not Marine Clean Energy would ever have greenhouse gases in excess of PG&E. I'd also like to add in the comment letter from PG&E, there was this reference that their projections over the 5 years were the CEQA baseline. And that's an inaccurate reference here because we do talk about baselines in CEQA, which we measure environmental effects against. But those are, a baseline is always actual conditions. And the only actual conditions that we have, frankly, are those conditions today. And under those current conditions, frankly, PG&E is not currently meeting the 20% standard set by the state for renewable energy. In terms of looking down the road, those are projections. And frankly, whether we make projections or they make projections, they're only estimates and projections. So that is not a baseline. That is simply what PG&E is estimating may occur down the road. And we don't know what it'll be, but in fact, the way the condition has been worded, it doesn't matter, because whether they continue to emit less greenhouse gases or they emit more, we're always going to have to be at or below those levels. So again, we're very satisfied with the condition that has been worked out with Shell. It took a fair amount of time to work this out to make sure it was correctly drafted and now has been presented for your consideration. I don't think there's a need to go into other details of the report. The report does address the various other objections that have been made by PG&E, also, in effect, also address the issues raised by the resident commenter who just made a comment here this last week. So our recommendation to the board is set forth in the staff report. It consists of 2 parts. The first part, when you get time to actually consider the contract and take action on it, would be the first steps are to make the environmental determinations. And once you make the environmental determinations as recommended, those 3 parts, series of steps you'll take. The last part will be to actually approve the contract, but then it directs the chair and interim director to provide for the execution of the contract once prices are determined to meet the resolution previously adopted by the board. Have any questions? I'd be happy to answer those at this time.
Colleagues?
Yeah, the CEQA, the 3 CEQA points that we'll be making as part of the motion, those would be part of the motion as findings?
Yes, those would be your determination, basically, of how you are actually treating this contract under CEQA. And so we would want to address each of those 3 points.
And the provision in this contract that makes it clear that there will be no construction under the contract,
yes,
does not preclude endeavors that this agency might take to create assets in the community or its whereabouts that would come under full CEQA review at the time that they were defined and developed.
That's precisely right. So any new facilities that were to be developed by the authority itself would be under CEQA review at that time. And likewise, even if Shell had opportunities for some new renewable facilities, that facility would have to go through a CEQA review before that could be something that could be provided to us as part of this contract. So again, doesn't preclude any new facilities, new renewables. It just says that right now, all of our demand can be met with existing facilities. There'll be no new construction required. And if any new construction does happen to take place in the future, it must be fully compliant with CEQA at that time.
Great, thank you.
Any other directors right now? I just want to make one comment, Greg. I am very happy with the additional provision in the contract. But I just want to say for the record that I think that the argument that has been put forward by PG&E that nuclear and large hydro is non-carbon is garbage, is bogus. And I continue to feel great revulsion at the canard that the life cycle impacts of nuclear power are somehow carbon-free. That's just a joke. When you mine uranium, you process uranium, you ship it, and then you store it for perhaps 500,000 years, the notion that nuclear power is carbon-free is just patently absurd on its face. But that's the game that PG&E is trying to trap us with. I think that the consulting analysis that leads to those kinds of claims is frankly shameful. Similarly, large hydro projects destroy entire ecosystems. And so there's literature extant out there on the web and other places in libraries that talks about the life cycle carbon emissions from flooding entire ecosystems. And so the notion that large hydro projects are truly carbon-free, I think, is also fairly bogus. But once again, this agency is fighting fire with fire, and we're stepping up and we're going to meet and beat all of those types of ploys that PG&E is using in its purposeful campaign to destroy this public agency and the will of the representatives that put us to work here. So I just wanted to get that on the record, frankly, but we'll meet it, and we'll beat those terms, and we'll utilize their accounting procedures to beat them at that game, and I appreciate the hard work that's gone into getting this contract provision added so that we have a guarantee now.
Yeah, maybe a quick related point to that, Greg. I find it significant that there's no dispute that PG&E will not meet its legal renewable portfolio standards. In fact, it'll fall quite short of those. I imagine that a court evaluating the balances here will find that very significant. Is that true?
Yes, I agree.
Also, what about the fact that, and again, this presupposes that PG&E will be the party bringing a potential CEQA challenge to our project. What about the fact that it appears that PG&E is essentially motivated to protect its monopoly position in the market, meaning really at the heart of it, they're preserving their economic self-interest? Would that be significant?
That can be a very significant factor with respect to standing to bring a CEQA suit.
Okay.
Other directors? Okay. So do we go back to Don to take us through any more of the contract, or do we just entertain public comment and motions and so forth?
Yes, public comment is the time for that right now. Would be perfect.
Great. Members of the public, anyone wishing to speak to us about the contract? Yes, sir. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name is Garrett Stone. The company is Aspire Corp. And I have some amount of background in renewable energy, as we talked about before. I just had a simple question that I was interested in broaching, and then you broached the subject. So I'd like to ask you about the points you were just speaking to, which you have a large amount of energy on. So let me try and ask the question carefully so as not to ignite that fuse. But what my question was was just whether there's a level playing field. I have never understood why under California law large hydro is not included as renewable, but your comments suggested certainly what the answer I guess is. But is MEA going to play by the same rules? Are you also excluding large hydro and nuclear?
The light green, oh wait, we shouldn't get into dialogue right here. Let me capture your question, then we'll ask staff to
My
address
core
this.
point is it ought to be a level playing field, and if you're going to hold PG&E to certain rules and regulations, then I would assume and expect and anticipate that MEA will play by the same role.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Gene Dyer from Santa Fe. Just a procedural question. You had a request for proposal that came in, and presumably there's been some negotiations since then. Now I see there's some additional things added. Does this mean that what you have on the table before you has been agreed by the other party? And if you sign it, will they immediately sign it?
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak on the contract? Very good. I'll bring it back to the board and then, oh wait, welcome Barbara.
I just wanted to say thanks. Wonderful job.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Actually, yeah, let's turn that around.
Thank you.
Thank you. You wouldn't be here without a lot of advocacy from you all. Don, did you want to address the question about the level playing field issue? I was going to start getting into our light green and the reason. Let me just start the response, if I may, and then I'll turn it to Don.
He can't resist.
Well, the legislature defined what qualifying renewable is. And so they went through a very detailed conversation that decided that for various reasons, including the one I mentioned about life cycle impacts and other habitat impacts, that it wouldn't be fair to call large hydro or nuclear qualifying renewable power. So our light green product and our deep green product won't have our light green product will have 25% qualifying renewable. In other words, not including nuclear or large hydro. Our deep green will have none of that either. It will also have no coal nor nuclear because this board has passed policy on those things. That said, though, what Mr. Stepanisic was getting at with respect to our CEQA deliberations, I'll ask Don and Greg to kind of answer that, because that gets into a different type of counterpoint that we've been locked in with PG&E for the last couple of months. And the short answer to your question is it will be a level playing field. To the extent that we count our beans, we'll be counting them the same way that PG&E does.
Yeah, do you want me to elaborate on that?
Sure.
Okay. So we, because of the kind of the realities of the energy market, there will be a need for us to, we'll be able to specify some of our specific energy assets, where they'll be coming from. And we'll do that up to a point. We might want to do that up to about 85–90%, but we don't want to overbuy in our specifying of resources. So for the top portion, in order to kind of even out the volumes and the load, we will need to use some of the system power that's available. System power is used by PG&E, it's used by the utilities throughout California to balance out their power, and you can't control what's in the system power mix. So even going back to when we issued our RFP, we had a caveat in there stating that no nuclear or coal power would be selected as a specific asset that we would put into our power mix, but we would allow some system power to allow for balancing out of the load. So when we're calculating greenhouse gas emissions, we'll be, as we're doing our beam counting, there may be some large hydro and nuclear that's in the system power mix. Of course, that would have to be counted and would go in to the calculation. I think that was the question.
Good. Thank you, Don.
And it would be calculated in the same way that PG&E calculates it, so that creates the level playing field.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it would be subject to the true-up period at the end of the year.
Yes, right.
So, directors, other questions on the contract or comments that you'd like to make as we get ready to call a question?
Just that staff did a spectacular job putting it together. All hands that worked on it are to be congratulated. The committee that worked to negotiate did a beautiful job, and I'm happy with what we've got, and I think it gives us a real strong position to move forward and succeed wildly.
Other directors in this direction? Director Thornton?
I would also like to thank a lot of members of the public who helped us get to this point with all of their input, their reviewing it, analysis, and suggestions that help make it even stronger.
Thank you. Madam Vice Chair, anything? No? Directors?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank all of you who have put in a lot of hard work, both in the board and public. I think it's been a tremendous accomplishment. It shows how grassroots issues can rise up, take a life of their own, and solve problems. And that really is what I think this authority and the staff have done here. It's very admirable. And it also, on the flip side of that, shows the power of competition and how competition sometimes can correct a couple of different problems at the same time in a beneficial way, socially.
With all the congratulations, I think we need to realize that we are still a long way from accomplishing this goal. And given the stance of PG&E, we still need all of your support and all of your assistance, because we still have a long way to go before this is a reality.
Thank you, Director. Director Connell?
Very strong first step. We couldn't have done it without the public, great staff. Congratulations are in order to everyone, and we really have the opportunity to be innovative here, and it's an exciting moment. We're going into it with our eyes open. We know there's going to be a lot of challenge, but I think we're up to the task.
Thank you.
Ditto.
Ditto.
So I'll try to tie a bow on just by saying that we've been rushing here in 7 short years, and there has been a ton of hard work from members of the community and citizens who have helped us review stuff, who've stood up and have offered thousands of hours of their personal time to this effort in repeated showdowns in council chambers and boardrooms. And so I just want to really thank the members of the public that are helping us keep our eye on the ball and error checking to make sure we get the best thing possible out of this. And then, of course, to staff and my colleagues on the board, I just can't, and our experts, I can't thank you all enough. This is a very momentous occasion. I think Director Cromwell raises a good point. I think the next 5 months are going to feel just as hard as the last 7 years have been. And so with great soberness and sort of deep sense of commitment, I'm happy to call the question on approving the contract and making the CEQA declarations as appropriate.
We may want to take this in 2 steps.
Okay.
The first step would be the CEQA determinations and the staff recommendation on CEQA, which would be the motion first to be taken by the board. Would be number 1, the contract does not constitute a project as defined by CEQA, and even if the contract is a project, it would be exempt from CEQA for the following separate independent basis. The contract is exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15061B3 because it is covered by the general rule that CEQA only applies to projects that have the potential for causing a significant impact on the environment, and it can be seen with certainty that there is no possibility that the contract may have a significant effect on the environment, and the authority acting in a regulatory capacity drafted the contract to serve as a regulation for the protection of natural resources, and specifically to reduce greenhouse gas production and the resulting impacts on natural resources resulting from climate change.
I would entertain a motion to that effect.
I'll move for approval of the CEQA findings.
Second.
I defer to the Vice Chair.
Any other board discussion? Any opposition? That passes unanimously.
The next motion would be the recommendation of staff to approve the final SENA MEA EEI Master Power Purchase and Sale Agreement, cover sheet and confirmation to provide electric power supply services to serve retail electric customers that will participate in the Marine Clean Energy Program, and authorize the chair to execute the contract subject to final pricing from supplier that is in compliance with resolution number 2009-07.
Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Is there any discussion? Let's see, Dawn or Jamie, would you help me do a roll call? We'd like to register a roll call vote on this one.
And it's a good idea just because of the voting requirements for this particular contract.
Okay. All right. So calling roll, Director Cromwell.
Aye.
Director Tremaine.
Aye.
Director McGlashan.
Aye.
Director Marshall.
Aye.
Director Martin. Oh, sorry.
He said yes.
Sorry, dude. What would you do, though, if you could?
Director Thornton.
Aye.
Director Connolly.
Aye.
Director Leone.
Aye.
and Director Slavitt.
Yes. Let the record show that that passed unanimously. Congratulations, everybody. Congratulations, Don. Very good. That brings us now to item number 6, which is the approval of our loan documents.
So on December 1st, at our board meeting in December, your board approved the implementation period budget for MEA, which was $1,685,000, which will cover, I'm sorry, I said that wrong, $1,685,000, which will cover the period of time between our launch period and the delivery of rate revenue, which is expected to occur in mid-July. And at this time, we have a loan agreement, actually a promissory note that has been included in your supplemental packet. And Beth Rasmussen is going to take us through it and explain what the terms are.
Thank you, Beth.
We've been working with a number of individuals who have agreed to provide a loan to the Marin Energy Authority. And we have been working with them to come up with a promissory note, an unsecured promissory note, which you'll find in the packet. Just generally looking at what the term of the note is, the term of the note, note will terminate at the first to occur of August 1st, 2011, or the closing of financing for phase 2 working capital. So when the MEA brings on its phase 2 load, they will be refinanced out. The individuals, the rate of return here, the interest rate under this loan is 5.75%. Those are really the key elements of the remainder of the note is a fairly standard form of promissory note. It should be noted, however, that there will be a few slight revisions to the note. We've received some additional comments that will need to be incorporated. In addition, there will be an additional provision, which perhaps Greg would like to touch on.
Yes, there will be a new section 11 added to the note. It just reflects what in fact was planned here all along, which is this is a limited obligation note in the following respect. It will be paid from rate revenues generated by the MEA and also from the monies received under this note. So that is limited obligations of the authority under the particular note. So we have just added that as the language, which is that this note is a limited obligation of borrower, payable only from the rate revenues of borrower and monies received under this note. So again, this reflects the intent of this transaction and also avoids any question about there being any debt limitation issue with this particular note.
And then just with respect to our counterparties, we have 3 counterparties that we have been working with, and they are Gwendolyn Grace Skipberg and Effie Westerveld. And so those will be our lenders, and again, the terms are in the promissory note.
And the note is identical for all 3 of those.
Exactly, and that's one of the provisions, so that each of them are treated the same.
Good. Board questions?
Yeah, I have some questions.
Director Leon?
So the draft that we have in our packet is the draft promissory note with the lender and the MEA, is that correct?
Correct.
So there's no reference to, in this note, to the co-signer or any sort of...
No, this is
That will be directly with the individuals and not part
exactly.
of an exhibit to this?
Yeah, this is an unsecured obligation, so there is no guarantor standing behind the lenders in this circumstance. Subsequent tranches of debt, the Board of Supervisors has approved a guarantee of another portion of the loan, but that does not cover this portion of the loan. You're correct.
Okay.
Yeah, what's being approved tonight is for the first tranche of the budget. The second tranche of the budget will be covered by a separate loan that's the paperwork is still being finalized, and so we'll be bringing that to your board in the very near term.
Okay. So I just have some technical questions, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
In the prior life. So in section 3D, at the end where all parity indebtedness will be due on the same maturity date, is that something where you've contemplated enough cash flow from ratepayers at that moment in time?
Yes, the way that this was structured is we structured it far enough out in the future so that we would have ratepayer revenue to refinance out these individuals. And we thought that it would be a sufficient amount of time pushing it out into the fall of 2011. And in addition, in order to, an event that would occur in any case is when we bring on a larger financing facility to bring on our phase 2 customers, we're going to have to hire staff and undertake certain costs. At that point in time, we're going to have to undertake a financing to do that. They would be taken out at that time, and that reduces any intercreditor issues that we might have.
Okay. The second is in 4A and 4B, where you have 3 days of to essentially cure default. But if I read this correctly, that's a rather short period of time, and it doesn't give you much opportunity to cure.
No, we recognize that it's a short cure period. It's a matter of when you have notes that are side by side, it's more difficult to enforce the cure provision, so we'll just be working in advance of that date to ensure that we are not in violation of those cure periods.
Yeah, I would encourage you to stretch those out, because even if you do it, I understand what you're trying to do, but even you have to allow time for things just to clear through the system, and if this doesn't meet whatever your clearing dates are from your bank, whatever we choose to, then you may be brushing up against this.
Okay.
So that's just something to consider. Sorry. And then the last one is the attorney's fees under 8B. That seems rather unusual to me, that if they elect to hire an attorney basically for any reason, that the MEA will pay for that. That either needs to be tuned up a bit, so that it has to have some basis, and they have to show that basis. Otherwise you're leaving yourself open, would be my read of it, unless, Greg, you read it differently.
No, we can further address that provision.
Okay. Now, this may be tied back to your 3 days default in section 8E, where you're waiving all notice of default or delinquency or acceleration. I mean, typically, you would require that if you have the leverage in the negotiations to require that, so someone can, if you happen to be on vacation and you're the finance guy and the payment is late, you would ask the other party to let you know, so you can, so someone has to notice when that cure period starts. So that may be something you might think about negotiating with them. Okay. And are you the Exhibit A, not permitted non-parity indebtedness? Excuse me. So in the River City Bank contemplated facility, is that, whose choice is it to go fixed or floating?
That was, Don, do you want to touch base on that?
Sure. It was kind of mutual. We're what we're contemplating for that term loan facility is we have a relatively short period of time where it's floating, and then it gets locked in later, and it mechanically it just makes more sense, and we were comfortable with what they proposed for that reason.
So I would just put forward that you should have that election yourself. If your cost of funds is lower, if you want to lock it in, it's up to you. If they're indifferent to that, it sounds like, unless that's part of their return calculation for them, it could be in the authority's favor. Since I don't think we've entered into this, it should be referenced as a possible alternative. All of these should be, except the ones that have previously taken place. The 950 and the 500 should all be possible. The way they're stated here is it's stated as a certainty.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Although this is a list of permitted indebtedness.
Right, so what I was going to get at there is that this is, if the creditworthiness of whatever borrower is the same, whether it's River City Bank or any other, you should have the right to substitute at your discretion. prior to entering into any loan document with any of these entities. So whether it's for the term loan or the working capital facility, and I would say you would like to put in even more flexibility with working capital, because that's more of a up and running kind of thing, and you should be able to shop around and change as you see fit.
Good.
As long as it's of equal credit quality.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Those are good catches.
Question.
Director.
Dawn, I wonder if you could explain, really for the education of the public, the sort of contingency or risk mitigation that we have here, because what we potentially may do is approve $750,000 promissory notes tonight to cover the first tranche, but we've also just approved the confirmation and the cover sheet for the Shell contract. And getting ready, hopefully, to sign on the dotted line with the bank and the Board of Sups as the co-sign. Will you talk a little bit about the difference between the confirm and the cover sheet and then the execution, and how that protects us from any kind of default on the Shell contract?
Sure. What was just approved by your board is both components of the contract, the confirmation and the cover sheet. And the cover sheet itself is really just an overarching document that describes how we're going to interact with our energy provider, but it doesn't have any specifics on the deal as far as volume, price, timing, and that sort of thing. So the cover sheet is ready to be executed as of tomorrow, now that your board has taken action on that. However, the confirmation can be executed at a date later, depending on a number of factors. And one of the factors that will likely be important in making that determination is ensuring that these other facilities are in place.
So we're not engaging in any kind of undue risk this evening because of the delay in execution on the confirm, that it allows us to get this piece in place and then potentially get the rest of the bank piece in place as early as next week, so that we're covered for the whole startup period, and then we're able to execute pending pricing and all of that, correct?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'll give you Dawn and Greg one thing I forgot. Do you want to comment on the non-recourse language that's in here? Is to follow up on the same kind of language that's in the contract?
Yes, it's an important point to mention here is that there is a provision here saying that the lender acknowledges and agrees that their only recourse is against the MEA itself and not the individual members. And that parallels the Shell contract, and this will be a standard provision we'll have in all our contracts, to make sure that anyone contracting with the MEA only has recourse against the MEA and not the individual members.
Okay. Beth and Don, how do we respond to Director Leon's good ideas and comments? Is that something, Greg, do we go ahead and approve this subject to?
I think it's the final revisions that are approved by the interim director and the general counsel. And those would be changes that are non-monetary, but they would be clarifications to the contract that would be necessary to close the deal.
Okay. And does it sound like those are feasible in the context of what our lenders are looking for?
Yeah. And helpful. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director. Great.
Does that have any bearing on this, Russell?
We have a resolution, Greg.
Yes, there is a resolution to approve the contracts, and the resolution also, I should say that the form of contract here will include section 11, which I read into the record this evening. But the action you can take here is simply to adopt the resolution, which will then proceed forward with the loan documents for the $750,000 of loan proceeds.
Very good. It doesn't look like any of the details will change this.
No, they don't. Yeah.
Okay. Good. So I guess then the process that we would take is approving this resolution.
A civil motion to approve the resolution is all that's necessary at this time.
Very good. Any other board discussion, questions? Members of the public, anything that you'd like to say to us about the proposed approval of this loan, the execution of these promissory notes? Yes, ma'am.
Don't fall, Kiki.
We need to get key person insurance on you.
No small claim.
Good evening, directors. It's such a spectacular evening for us. I just want to say kudos and thank you for all your hard work in these last days to nail down this funding that enabled us to go forward. It was an enormous effort and really almost brought tears to our eyes. Actually did bring tears to our eyes. So thank you.
Let's see, seeing no one else rise, I'll bring it back to the board.
Chair, I would move resolution 2010 next in order, resolution of the Marin Energy Authority approving the execution of the promissory notes.
Second.
Motion and a second.
And that'll just be subject to the final revisions we talked about being
Correct.
approved by Don and myself.
Great.
Because
Any
it's a
discussion?
because it's a contractual obligation, so we do a roll call, is that unnecessary?
That could be done, it's not required in this case, but that would be.
Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, is there any opposition? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. Great. Okay, next item up is a request from the technical committee to add Director Collins to that standing committee of the board. Would the committee chair like to say anything about that?
Yes, Chair, I'd be happy to. First of all, just to underscore again the fantastic work that our colleague Director Martin performed on the committee. He'll be sorely missed. We did take the item up at our last meeting of a potential successor, and we do have a recommendation on that.
Great.
We'd like to recommend Director Dick Collins to fill that vacant position.
Thank you. I'll second that. Good.
And as his representative here tonight, I would like to thank you all for that support.
Hopefully he's okay.
I assume you've discussed it with him. And
That's what happens when you're not at the meeting.
the guy who ain't here gets pinned.